The following is a presentation of the Steamboat Church of Christ in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. We hope that you find today's lesson, presented by our minister, Dr. Joseph Becker, informative, insightful, and inspirational.
In 2006, the movie Dreamgirls came out, a triumph story of a Motown trio in the 1960s who crossed over and made it big in mainstream music. Now, I did not see the movie myself. I was in the first year of my doctoral program. I barely saw the light of day that year, much less any movies. But I'm familiar with at least one song from the film because of its enduring popularity among contestants on singing competition shows. In the movie, it's sung by protagonist Effie White, played by Jennifer Hudson, and it features prominently in the storyline because it is both autobiographical for the character and thematic for the overall plot of the film. Now, I couldn't for the life of you, or the life of me, tell you what the tune of this song is, because it's one of those songs that lends itself to being embellished and being sung at full throttle. So the melody tends to get buried in the appoggiatura, which often ends up sounding something like a harp seal being beaten to death with a steam calliope. Nevertheless, it's quite stirring, it's quite entertaining, and it's a real crowd pleaser. The song is, "And I'm Telling You," and the lyrics in part run, "And I am telling you, I'm not going. You're the best man I've ever known. There's no way I can ever go. No? No, there's no way. No. 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 No way I'm living without you. I'm not living without you. I don't want to be free. I'm staying. I'm staying, and you are going to love me." And it goes on much the same way for three more verses, ending finally in this hopeful and confident and insistent refrain. I'm not going, I'm staying, and you are going to love me. Making this perhaps one of the most limerent songs ever written. Now, I printed a definition for you in your bulletin. Limerence is a state of mind which results from a romantic attraction to another person and typically includes obsessive thoughts and fantasies and a desire to form or maintain a relationship with the object of one's love and to have one's feelings reciprocated. Now, in the movies, especially in romantic comedies, this kind of determination is portrayed as noble and winsome. I'm particularly fond of the backstory in the movie Big Fish, in which Edward Bloom goes to such great lengths to woo and win the love of his heart, Sandra. But there's a darker side to limerence as well. I mean, if you take the basic plot line of Beauty and the Beast and drop it into a real-life setting, you'd end up with a psychodrama at best, and at worst, a grotesque ordeal involving a number of federal crimes: kidnapping, deprivation, manipulation, resulting in a life sentence for the Beast and a lifetime of counseling and therapy for Belle. Now, in this particular case, in this particular song, the tone of the lyrics is confident and insistent. But frankly, it doesn't matter what the tone is. It doesn't matter whether the tone is winsome or longing, or woeful, hopeful, noble, steadfast, optimistic, anticipatory, forlorn, or despondent. One of the cold hard facts of the matter is that whenever someone is intent on winning another person's love, in that moment, in that situation, the suitor and the suitee are in an unequal relationship. And that is pure agony, both for the wooer and the wooee. Because though it sometimes happens, at least in the movies, that the enamored aspirant, after much persistence and clever courting, wins the affections of his or her would-be significant other, the much more likely outcome will be a broken heart and or a restraining order. Because one of the hardest things in the world for people to come to terms with is unrequited love. But this, it seems, is part of the human condition, and it always has been. It's as old as the tragedy of Dido and Iarbas, which dates back to 814 BC. Now, you may not have heard of this story, but this is a story that stands behind the legend of Dido and Aeneas. As you may recall, if you were paying attention in 7th grade Old World history, Virgil was a Roman poet who about 30 BC wrote the Aeneid, an epic poem which included, among other things, the story of Dido and Aeneas. And according to Virgil's story, Aeneas, who was the founder of Rome, fell deeply in love with Dido, who was the queen of Carthage. But they could not marry because Dido had long been courted by Iarbas, the king of Mauritania. However, Dido had never loved Iarbas. The only reason she had ever considered his advances toward her in the first place was because he had threatened to make war with Carthage if she did not marry him. And she had put off marrying him for many years. Then, in the meantime, she fell in love with Aeneas and felt trapped by her dilemma. And when Aeneas went off to conquer Italy, he was away for such a long time that Dido feared he would never return. So, seeing no other way out for herself or her country, she grew despondent and ordered that a funeral pyre be built, and in deep despair threw herself upon it, ending her life and robbing Iarbas of his longed-for prize, her love. Now, if that story is true, it's melodramatic, but it isn't all that extraordinary. Clearly, Iarbas had some problems. I mean, obviously, if you're trying to win somebody's love, the threat of violence is probably not the best way to go about it. But Iarbas wouldn't be the first person in history to make that mistake. Certainly wouldn't be the last. Our prisons are full of them. Because unrequited love often drives people to desperation. Limerence often drives people to extremes. Now, why is that? Well, because it's such a painful thing. I'll never forget when I was a youth minister in Houston, we had a young man in our youth group who was profoundly socially challenged. Now, we actually had several young men in the group who were socially awkward. But this particular young man seemed to most of us to be an extremely unlikely candidate as someone who would have a girlfriend before he graduated from high school. But he surprised us all when he showed up to a youth outing one day with a girl on his arm. Now, I apologize if this sounds crass, but it was readily apparent to all the adults involved from the get-go that this relationship was doomed for failure. First, because she was about 3 years younger than he, and second, because, frankly, she was out of his league. She was pretty, smart, and popular. Her only apparent flaw was that she was stupid enough and apparently poorly supervised enough to date a high school junior when she was only about 13 or 14 years old. But clearly, he was madly in love with her and had somehow persuaded her to date him. But it wasn't too many months before she started making up excuses not to see him. And I just watched and waited for the other shoe to drop. And when it dropped, it fell hard. I was in my office getting ready for Sunday night church, and in walked this young man. And as soon as the words came out of his mouth that she had dumped him, he began to sob, and he didn't stop sobbing for at least 2 hours. He threw himself down on the couch in my office and wailed at the top of his lungs, "It hurts. Oh God, it hurts." A few minutes into this, one of our elders walked by my office, and I stopped him and said, "I'm not going to be able to lead singing for church tonight. I've got something else that I need to attend to." He didn't hesitate for a minute. He would much rather have been asked to lead singing at the last minute than to deal with this. Then, about halfway through church, I slipped out of my office and went to church services and tapped one of our youth sponsors on the shoulder, a woman who was very nurturing with good maternal instincts, and I said, "I need your help." She came to my office and sat down, and this young man, who was fairly tall, but didn't weigh but $120, crawled into her lap and sobbed for another 90 minutes, the whole time crying, "It hurts. Oh God, it hurts." Now, over the course of time, this young man eventually recovered. He eventually stopped hurting so badly from the loss of his first love. And some years later, met a lovely young lady who was really a good match for him, and he married her. But on that day, 20-some-odd years ago, when his heart was broken for the first time, he learned something very valuable, something that I think everybody learns at some point in their lives, and that is that you can't make someone else love you. You just can't do it, no matter how hard you try, no matter how much you give of yourself. No matter how much you want them to love you, no matter how much you love them, No matter how many times or how many ways you tell them that you love them, no matter how many times or how many ways you show them that you love them. In the words of Bob Dylan, who wrote the song recently re-recorded by Adele Adkins, I'd go hungry. I'd go black and blue. I'd go crawling down the avenue. You know there's nothing that I wouldn't do to make you feel my love. Unfortunately, there is nothing you can do to make another person feel your love. You can't pull your heart out of your chest and place it in their bosom and cause them to feel what you're feeling. And you certainly can't make them feel the same in return. It just can't be done. No one can do that, not even God. Now, I realize that on the face of it, that may sound blasphemous. After all, Jesus did say in Matthew 19:26, in response to the query about the rich entering the kingdom of heaven, men do not have the power to do this, but with God all things are possible. Well, God is all-powerful, and what that means is that in regard to the set of things that can be done, God has the complete power to do them. But there are certain absurdities that we can dream up that cannot be done. God cannot not be. He cannot not be who he is and what he is. And he cannot not be sovereign over his own creation. So no, if you've ever wondered or if you've ever been asked the question by someone who thought they were being clever, God cannot create a rock so large that he can't lift it. Because that proposition requires that we imagine a God who is both sovereign over his creation and not sovereign over it at the same time and in the same relationship. With God, all things are possible, but that isn't a thing. It's a manifest absurdity, a non-thing. Well, in the same way, God also cannot make anyone love him, and for a similar reason. God cannot make anyone love him not just because doing so would run contrary to his own character and nature, though it would, but also, and more importantly, because love, in order to be love, must be entered into freely and voluntarily. The Stockholm Syndrome isn't love. There are ways to induce an ingrained sense of belonging, loyalty, affinity, and even an acquired appetite of the heart for another person. But any state of the heart or mind brought about under duress cannot, by definition, be considered love. Love, if it is love, cannot be artificially induced. And this is so no matter what kind of love is in view. And that brings us to where I want to begin with this morning's lesson. For the last 6 weeks, we have been studying the Lord's sixth post-resurrection appearance, his third to the apostles, his appearance on the shore of the Sea of Tiberias. Now, that appearance began at dawn. The apostles had been out on the boat fishing all night and had caught nothing. Jesus appeared standing on the shore and told them to cast their nets to starboard. They did so and captured a draught of large fish, 153 in all. When they pulled the net ashore, they found that Jesus had cooked breakfast for them, so they sat down and ate with him. For the last 6 weeks, we've been studying the significance of that event. However, this appearance of Christ has 3 major components. The miraculous draught of the 153 fish is but the first of those 3. The text goes on, and what I want to do this morning is to pick up where in previous weeks we have left off. John 21, 15 through 17. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Feed my lambs." He said to him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep." Now, there are a lot of things going on in this passage, and it'll take several weeks to work our way through them. For this morning, however, I just want to focus in on one aspect of the conversation between Jesus and Peter. Here, 3 times the Lord asked Peter, "Do you love me?" And 3 times Peter answers in the affirmative. However, the 3rd time, the question grieved Peter. But why? Why does Jesus ask 3 times, and why is it that the 3rd time that he asks, the question is grievous? Well, the answer won't be much of a surprise to you, probably. Chances are you've heard this teaching before, perhaps even from me. But there's something about the answer that is key to framing the questions that I want to ask of this text in the weeks to come. So I want to ask you to stay tuned in, even if you think you know where I'm going with this lesson. What's going on in this passage has to do with a foible of the English language. Now, English is the single most vocabulous language in the history of humankind. The total vocabulary of the Greek language in the 1st century consisted of just over 20,000 lexical words. But 21st century English has over 400,000 lexical words. However, in linguistics theory, it is held that all natural languages possess grammars and lexicons that are rich enough to express and communicate any conceivable thought, and that all written natural languages are equally expressive. So English is not more expressive than Greek, but it is an extremely nuanced and finely tuned language, having on average 20 subtly different ways to express what is communicated by any given word in Koine Greek. And this is true for English as compared to other languages as well. For instance, you've probably heard the claim that Inuit has 50 words for snow, whereas English has only 1. Now that's an urban legend. I did the research myself 8 years ago, shared these numbers with you in actually the 5th sermon that I ever preached after coming here in 2008. In actual fact, the Inuit language has 80 terms for snow, but the English language has 482. And I could give you many more examples. The point is that as a rule of thumb, English is far more subtly articulate than all other natural languages, including Koine Greek. So it's unusual to find an instance in which the English language is not equipped to efficiently express a Greek idea. But that is exactly the case in John 21, 15 through 19. Because you see, in Greek, there are 4 words for love, each of which has its own area of meaning, and English is not equipped to express these words neatly or concisely. Now, for the sake of today's lesson, I want to break these words down into 2 categories: words for ensuant love and words for pursuant love. Now, ensuant love is reactive. It is the love that ensues as a result of other events or circumstances. And the 2 Greek words that refer to this kind of love are phileo and storge. Now, phileo means affectionate regard or fondness with a sense of ease, welcome, and belonging. It refers to loyalty among friends, family, and community, and flourishes in an environment of virtue, equality, and familiarity. And storge refers to love or affection in the context of family life, specifically in regard to the relationship between parents and children. It is the common natural empathy felt by parents for their offspring. This word is also used to express the love of one's country, the kinship one feels with fellow countrymen, and the pride one takes in one's champions. In all cases, however, storge communicates a sense of inevitability, of embracing one's circumstances as certain, familiar, and comfortable. A few days ago, I caught a few minutes of a television show, a kind of light-hearted drama about a loose-knit family of friends and relatives in Australia. And the scene I saw came at the end of a very trying day, and 4 members of this family, a father, son, and 2 friends, were sitting on the roof of the house in the night eating cake. And the father is having a lot of self-doubts. And he turns to his son, who is a young adult, and asks, "Have I been a good father?" And at first the son kind of shrugs as though it's a silly question. But then the gravity of the question sinks in, and he says, Oh, you're asking me. You're actually asking me if you've been a good father. Well, I've never really thought to ask if you could be a better father any more than to think to ask if the moon could be better than it is. You've always been there. So yeah, I'd say you've been quite a good father. Beloved, that is ensuant love. That's the kind of love described by the words phileo and storge, a love that receives what is with thanks, embracing that reality as good, normal, and valuable. And we find these two words, phileo and storge, combined in the word philostorgos in Romans 12:10, where Paul says, "Be kindly affectioned one to another, with brotherly love, in honor giving preference to one another." Now, pursuant love, on the other hand, is a love that actively pursues the object of its affection. And the two Greek words that refer to this kind of love are eros and agape. Now, eros means love that desires, that pours forth, that searches out, that speaks out, love that is eager and that strengthens. This is the word that's used for romantic love and for sexual passion. However, physical attraction does not always accompany eros. Plato defined eros as that which seeks and brings out the best in a person, the ideal, calling them to beauty and spiritual truth. And as two persons through eros are drawn toward what is ideal, the two are inexorably drawn to one another. This is what is known as platonic love. And this is what seems to be in view, I think, so nobly, for instance, in the love shared between David and Jonathan. 1 Samuel 18, 1 through 5, as soon as David had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David, because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt. And David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him, so that Saul set him over the men of war. And this was good in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. And again in 2 Samuel 1, 25 through 26, when Jonathan has died, David mourns him, saying, "How the mighty have fallen in the midst of the battle. Jonathan lies slain on your high places. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women." And finally, the word agape means to desire, to prize as a precious treasure, to greet with joy, to caress, while at the same time evoking a noble love, a love that entreats, a love that holds in high regard. And Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 6 and 8, agape is patient. Agape is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Agape does not delight in evil, but rejoices with truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Agape never fails. And that love, the love described in the words eros and agape, is pursuant love, a love that desires, pours forth, searches out, speaks out, and strengthens. And that is noble, charitable, self-effacing, and altruistic. Now, I hope you can see the difference between ensuant love and pursuant love. Pursuant love is a cause. Ensuant love is an effect. And that is a difference with a distinction. A difference that ends up being very important in understanding John 21, 15 through 17, where it says, "When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, 'Simon, son of John, do you love me pursuantly more than these?' He said to him, 'Yes, Lord, you know that I love you ensuantly.' He said to him, 'Feed my lambs.' He said to him a second time, 'Simon, son of John, do you love me pursuantly?' He said to him, 'Yes, Lord, you know that I love you insolently. He said to him, tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me insolently? And Peter was grieved, because he said to him the third time, do you love me insolently? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you insolently. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. You see, Jesus loves Peter, and his love for him is best described as agape, pursuant love. And it is not unreasonable for him to have an expectation that his love for Peter will be requited, that Peter will love the Lord just as the Lord loves him, but he isn't limerent about it. Jesus is not needy, and he will do nothing to force Peter's hand. He asks Peter the question, and Peter answers him, and Jesus accepts his answer. Likewise, Peter loves Jesus, and his love for him is best described as phileo, ensuant love. And he knows that that isn't the Lord's highest hope for him. He knows that the Lord would prefer it if Peter loved him with agape, pursuant love. But the Lord knows the hearts of men, and there's no fooling him. And at this point, even if Peter could get one over on Jesus, he wouldn't do it, because he loves Jesus. Now perhaps he could, or should, love the Lord more than he does, or differently than he does. But there's no evidence to suggest that he ever moved beyond phileo for the Lord and became possessed of agape for him. He may have. In his letters to the church, he calls on other believers to live in agape to the Lord, but he never makes the claim for himself. No, the only love that Peter ever professed for the Lord, at least as far as the New Testament record is concerned, is phileo. And as it turns out, that was good enough for Jesus. The Lord did not hold the love that Peter could give him in contempt. No, he went right ahead and blessed him and trusted the church into his hands, making him his under-shepherd on earth. And I think there's a good lesson in that for us. Beloved, we ought never to profess a love greater than the love we possess. As Paul tells us in Romans 12:9, let love be genuine. And as Peter tells us in 1 Peter 1:6-9, in this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Though you have not seen him, you love him. Though you do not now see him, you believe in him, and rejoice with joy that is inexpressible and filled with glory, obtaining the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls. Now, that lays the foundation for the things I want to say over the next few weeks, because one of the things that is drawn out in this conversation between Jesus and Peter is the fact that inequality is a hallmark of the kingdom of God. And we see this inequality brought out in several ways in this passage. And I'll be wanting to talk about how that is, how it's demonstrated to us, and how it's good. That's my lesson for today.
This has been a presentation of the Steamboat Church of Christ. We hope that you have found Dr. Becker's message well appointed. To hear more lessons like this one, visit our website at www.steamboatchurch.org or come see us at 1698 Lincoln Avenue in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. Bible classes are Sunday mornings at 9:30 and worship services are at 10:30. We look forward to meeting you. Until then, may the grace and peace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you.